Hi, friends. Welcome to Cuppa Joe. Today, in our humble little carpenter shop, I have a very special guest all the way from Rome, Dr. Elizabeth Lev. Welcome.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for being here. And like I like to ask all of our guests, the first question is always, how do you like your Cuppa Joe? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a Boston raised art historian who ended up in the city of Rome. And I work here as a guide. I teach art history. I lecture on the history of art. And because I am a fully adopted Roman, I always take my coffee, black espresso, demi-tasse. This is how we do it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, as you were talking, I put a couple of images up there on the bookshelf in our carpenter shop. You're quite prolific. I see at least three of your books here, one of which we'll do a deep dive into. And then a couple of famous people up there in the right-hand corner. Can you just give us a thumbnail sketch of what's going on there?
In the far right was working with the cast and crew of Angels and Demons, which while I can't say I approve of the book, the people involved were lovely, and it was wonderful to be able to show them Rome. And in particular, you have Ron Howard, who I have to say had a tremendous love of the Eternal City and really admired and appreciated its beauty, as did his entire cast and crew. And then the other one is Raymond Arroyo, who is always so incredibly good to me. He had me on to talk about my book, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith. And every now and then he invites me on to spar with him because he sometimes we don't agree on things, and he gives me space to actually talk to him and push back. So I really enjoy any opportunity I have to talk with Raymond because he's great fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, the world is really small. When I saw Ron Howard there, I thought of my uncle right away. My uncle Dave, he writes music for movies, and Ron is a good friend of his. So, the law of the separation of six, so it's alive and
Yep.
well. Well, my next question is maybe one you haven't been asked before, but since you're an official wine expert, if Saint Joseph were a wine, what would he be, and how would his bottle description read?
Well, I see you have definitely chosen some very interesting proposals here. And of course, there actually is a whole region of France as a wine that's produced in Saint Joseph. And then you have here from Guigal, which produces Côte Rôtie, which would be a very, I think, appropriate wine for Joseph because Côte Rôtie is a very earthy wine. One of the things that makes it so special is that it really has this sense of the humus, the earth. And of course, one of the great qualities of St. Joseph is his humility, which again comes from the word humus or earth. But when I was thinking about it, I we have a wine here from Umbria, and Umbria is a place that produced some pretty incredible saints. I mean, Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Clare, Saint Rita of Cascia, Saint Benedict, Saint Scholastica. They come out of this region. And if you visit the region of Umbria, it's a very rugged region. It's not kind of the soft rolling hills of Tuscany. It's this much kind of raw, these powerful trees along these sharp edges, this very kind of rugged landscape. And they produce a wine called Sagrantino di Montefalco. And that wine is a very austere wine. It's not kind of a soft Merlot based, round, easygoing wine. It's a wine with a kind of backbone and austerity. And it makes me think of that sort of rugged Joseph, that figure of self-mastery, which is really something that one of the most beautiful reflections that from, Saint Augustine down to Gracian, they begin to think more and more about this way that Joseph, in huge circumstances, in this rugged landscape of very difficult, things that are happening, Joseph has this tremendous austerity, self-mastery, and power to continue. It's a wine that's not as appreciated as it ought to be, and I have to say I feel that way about poor Saint Joseph. And it's a wine that takes a while to open up and to mature. And just like with the imagery of Saint Joseph and the devotion to Saint Joseph, it took many, many years for people to really learn to love and to go to Joseph.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I loved how you hit on the humus and the humility. Yeah, that's great. Well, you're definitely an expert sommelier, if I'm saying that word properly. I'm such a non-wine expert. I don't even know how to say the proper word for a wine expert.
Sommelier.
That's the one. That's the one. Well, that is so awesome. Well, thank you so much. You hit on some really profound things right there. Because I think a lot of times, I've heard one of the saints say that, of course, Christ is like the sun, Our Lady's like the moon. So then, of course, that would mean like Joseph is like the earth, like, the earth beneath our feet, the humble behind the scenes man, as it were. Well, that's fantastic. Well, let me dive now into your amazing book. Well, one of your amazing books, I should say, The Silent Night. And in this book, which I just really, really love, you have a quote that is quite pregnant, and let me just quote it. Quote, Joseph is a beacon in an era that undervalues fatherhood, denigrates masculinity, and ridicules chastity. End quote. Please unpack that for us. And what artwork would you say captures Joseph as this beacon?
So, in our particular age, I don't think it is a surprise to your listeners to find, no matter where we look, if we look to the entertainment industry, really the idea of fatherhood, the idea of chastity, the idea of um, holding up sort of a male dignity, all of these things have been sort of very much sidelined, if not denigrated, if not ridiculed, if not created sort of viewed with a very, very cynical eye by popular culture. And so we have a kind of crisis in men, I think it's safe to say, in this day and age. And Joseph really, he is a very good model for men even now. I mean, I think one of the things that spurred me to write the book and that really interested me about the book is that this figure of Joseph, because he says so little, because he's not an overt protagonist, like we have a sense of what kind of guy Peter is, and we have a sense of what kind of guy John the Baptist is, but because of Joseph's silence, he's able to take on many different roles. I mean, he's like one of those actors who, instead of sort of impressing his personality on every single role, look at me, I'm here, he's one of those actors that's able to subsume himself into these different periods. So what interests me about Joseph is that whatever the church needs as an example, Joseph is there. And in our particular day and age, where we're looking for a way for men to be sensitive, men to be able to flank women who in this day and age often make more money or more successful than their husbands, a world where there's such a doubt about the importance of children, all of these different things. We have a saint whose example and his particular way of being allows us to he impresses himself onto this new role of showing us a way of holiness even in our very modern times. So when it comes to an image, as a matter of fact, it's on the cover of the book there. The artist who I think really captured an extraordinary element of Saint Joseph was Esteban Murillo. And he is the one who gives us images of a youthful Joseph. So you see him in you see him as a young man. You see him as a virile man, as a handsome man, and very often it happens that Joseph looks a lot like the way Jesus will look. So he'll be holding baby Jesus, but at the same time, he looks like the older Christ. And so you can see this impression, this role that Joseph has in forming the young child who is with him into the man he will be. And so that I think is he's usually represented with this light sort of very suffused with light. In the Murillo paintings, the Velázquez paintings, you'll see him with this beam of light on him. And so you really do understand this line, which becomes very popular in the 17th century when these paintings are being produced, go to Joseph. That's what I meant by that.
That's wonderful. And as you were talking, I put up this painting by Murillo, and I was hoping that you might say him because I had one handy. And this fits perfectly to my next question, which I want to ask about this this technique. And let me just bring up the right image to kind of be the perfect image when I ask you this. Okay, there we go. So this image, which is also on the book cover of Mike Aquilina in his book on St. Joseph and his world, and also in an episode of Cuppa Joe, Mike said, quote, "To sketch St. Joseph, an author must use something like the painterly technique of chiaroscuro. How can we use this painterly technique as a theological method for unpacking Josephology?"
So chiaroscuro is a principle that is part of the drawing stage of art, where an artist uses light chiaro and scuro shadow in order to create a three-dimensionality of the figure. So this is how it begins. It begins with modeling a figure so that it's not just a flat impression on a surface, but the impression has depth. It has three dimensions. And that's really, I think, the first part of understanding Joseph. He went from being such a background figure that he's barely mentioned in the Gospels. He doesn't show up in the history of art until the fifth century. And so he goes, they first attempt to sketch him, as it were, and then we begin to add the chiaroscuro, creating the depth, creating the three-dimensionality, a figure that seems to come out from the background into the foreground. What happens between the Renaissance and the Baroque era and the de la Tour painting that you have up is that chiaroscuro begins to be employed for dramatic effect. So what they want to do is they want to use chiaroscuro to create a light that comes, this is now through painting, a light that comes into the darkness, awakens the darkness, and creates much more drama than before. And I think that also reflects in the way that Joseph's role changes and grows during the course of the Renaissance to the Baroque era. There's an exponential transformation in the devotion to Saint Joseph that happens between, say, Raphael through Murillo Velázquez moving into the Cusco school, where he will become the patron of the good death. He'll become a patron of families, becomes a patron of marriage, becomes a patron of the papacy. And so his role becomes much, much, much more dramatic. And we start thinking much more of an actor, a protagonist in the story of salvation, instead of where he was at the beginning, which was a vague background figure. And so I think chiaroscuro is a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, to me, it's really quite profound because not only it seems like some of the best chiaroscuro paintings have Saint Joseph in it, and there's something about bringing him out of the shadows, so to speak. Um, yeah, I'm definitely not a painter. I know very little about art. My profession is a pilot, and as pilots, we know about the eyes. And if you're flying the daytime, you use the cones, and if you're flying at nighttime, you use the rods. So at nighttime, to see traffic, you should kind of look off center a little bit to be able to see it better. So I think theologically, we can see Saint Joseph better if we look off center a little bit by looking at Jesus and Mary. So as you've said so eloquently, St. Joseph's kind of like a blank canvas, kind of like a white canvas, because he was silent in scripture. So to hear what, the father said, we can listen to the son or to the wife. And I don't know how to put in words, but is that somehow like this painterly technique that I would probably butcher if I try to say it again, chiaroscuro? Is there something going on
Mhm.
here that's kind of theo-artistic, if that's a word, if I could combine those two words?
Well, there's undoubtedly the use of the light and shade in de la Tour, which derives from Caravaggio, which then is taken up by Murillo and also by Velázquez. This way of using light and dark when it's pioneered, and basically, when it's pioneered, it comes as a representation of the divine emerging into the everyday. So we see this divine illumination. So in this particular painting, which is really a very lovely painting because of its fact that it celebrates the worker, Saint Joseph. You sort of imagine Saint Joseph who's got an order to finish, and there he is working at night trying to maintain the word that he gave to get something done. So this idea, again, this tremendous respect for the worker. There he is with his son, and his son holds this candle to help him at night. But what's really happening is this incredible intimacy in which Joseph, while doing his tasks, is in the presence, in the knowledge of God, who is sitting there holding the candle for him. And so that luminosity is a way for us to really think about that here was a man being a father doing his job, but all the while he was with God and he knew it.
Yeah, that if that doesn't just like blow your mind, I don't know what would. Thank you for illuminating us on that. And as you're talking, give me two really cool ideas. Like one, maybe this light and dark thing is because, Joseph is the father of Jesus. Jesus is the light of the world. So he's like, in a certain real sense, the father of the light. Um, uh, and then the other thing is, it's called artwork. And isn't it cool that maybe every artist is like a hidden Joseph because the artist doesn't speak. The artist lets the artwork do the speaking.
Exactly. That's a really lovely way of thinking about it. Exactly. The artist is in many ways participating, like Joseph, because the artist is the tacit preacher. He is the mute theologian. He puts forward an image. He puts forward the result of his efforts for us to interpret, but he is not speaking directly to us with his voice. The, um, I think it's a really beautiful observation.
Well, let us now hop into our time machine and go back to the most ancient images of St. Joseph in art. As an art historian, please paint a picture for us using the three most ancient images of St. Joseph. And what silent sermons in stone do these images preach?
Well, you have up the oldest image of Saint Joseph in the history of art. He appears for the very first time in Saint Mary Major, where that's the very first time we see him. He is walking out of his house, and I think it's a very interesting first representation of Joseph, where we see him as so youthful, right? So this is work about the fifth century. It's work about the fifth century. He's wearing a sort of short tunic. So if you think about how within a couple centuries, Saint Joseph will be represented as an old man, the fact that he's represented as young, virile, powerful, it's a very close connection to where the work has been placed. The work is in the Church of St. Mary Major, which was a church built in a neighborhood in the 5th century, which were surrounded by people who spent all their time in imperial court. So they were able to show an image of Joseph because that world had a very easy understanding of what it would be like to be the consort of a queen, like what it is if you are acquiring the emperor's daughter, then you are clearly you understand that there's a situation where you may look but you may not touch. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so it has it has that world was much more open to Joseph as the chaste, virile, strong, masculine consort to Mary. Then the images will change into these older images of Joseph. You'll see a more troubled Joseph. And in fact, particularly in more popular art, we begin to see and Joseph represented as an older man, all part of a design to protect the concept of Mary's virginity, but also a man who's often very troubled. He sort of sits in a kind of grumpy little corner, and that has a lot to do with people reflecting on. Uh, Reflecting on a man who's been given awesome responsibilities. So, this every time Joseph turns around, he's being asked to do something that just seems beyond what you would ask a normal person to do, right? And there's that image of the troubled Joseph that becomes very popular, and I think garners a lot of sympathy, makes him feel very accessible to people. Like I can talk to that guy. That guy knows how hard it is.
Definitely. But it's so this is, you said, the most ancient image of Joseph of any
Hmm.
church in the world. That
Yep,
is
as far as we
that
know. Yep.
is that is so cool. So looking at just the colors here, I mean, I can't help noticing that, he has on a white tunic, kind of a brown earthy cloak, and he's got dark hair and beard. Um,
Hmm.
so a couple of questions, just to follow up on that, like, um, so when exactly, how much later did the white-haired Joseph come along? And then also, a lot of times in the US we see, we think Joseph's color is green, but it seems like maybe his first colors were white and brown, but maybe in Italy sometimes I see him in red or purple. So from an art historian side, like how have the colors that, like Mary's usually blue, Joseph's usually green, but is that just an American thing? Can we blame the Irish? How did that happen?
Let's not blame the Irish. It has to do with what they're trying to express about the figures. So, starting with this figure here, the fact that the angels are wearing togas is a heads up that we're dealing with a very Roman image, and even Joseph is wearing something that is it's a costume more for a Roman court, and the saffron colored mantle is again indication of a man of authority, as is the fact that he holds a kind of rod, like he's an important guy. The So this is kind of an anomaly because they're representing Joseph, and really most of the figures that are represented in the whole cycle. This is one of many different paintings. They are creating Mary will be on the other side of this image. Mary is receiving the angel Gabriel in a princess dress. So they're really using a visual language that's meant to speak to people who are accustomed to the costumes of the imperial court. The color choices of Joseph will alter quite a bit. He will, for a very interesting period in the 13th, 14th, 15th century, he will wear blue and gold, which is very interesting because these are the same colors that St. Peter wears. So there comes a period where it takes the context for you to be able to understand that the figure is Joseph or St. Peter because they look so close, and and Joseph wears the colors that are traditionally associated with St. Peter. And I think that's also, one of the ways that they talk about Joseph. There's an interest in using Joseph as a model for the papacy. The choice of Mary's blue and red and Jesus's red and blue has always been, in Western art, is generally connected to the idea of the mortal nature and grace. So, in the case of Mary, very often in art, she will wear a red dress with a blue mantle. The red dress is her mortal nature. The blue mantle, this is again in Western art, the blue mantle is she's cloaked in grace. Jesus is often inverted because he will be wearing the blue and then cloaked in mortality. So blue for grace for God, and then he's cloaked in mortality. So Joseph doesn't really participate very much Although in some other images, I saw some lovely images where they would often put Mary and Joseph in the same clothes in different parts of the painting to try to create the unity between them. Eventually, they're going to move towards this purpley brown color. And the purpley brown color brings us to the one is the idea of the royalty. Don't forget that there's a long period when Saint Bernard of Clairvaux talks about the nobility and the lineage of Joseph. Joseph is of a royal line, but at the same time, when you take that purple and you bring it down into these brown colors, which will become a very popular color for Joseph, we have this color of the earth, the color of this humility, this figure who is just there to serve his wife and his son. The addition of green is something that's been a lot more modern, and it shows up a great deal in these omnipresent little plastic figures. And I think it's really it's the idea more of this kind of liturgical color of hope than really kind of thinking about the character of Joseph, because he really doesn't wear that. He doesn't wear green in the history of art, not until recently.
And Dr. Elizabeth, the from my research, for example, in one book, well, I wish I had a picture, but I don't have an image of it. So if you don't mind, I'll just try to paint a word picture. On page 72 of this book called Journey with Joseph, under the section it says, "A picture's worth 1,000 words." It says, quote, "The three most ancient icons of Joseph depict him as a younger man. St. Hippolytus's catacomb, 3rd century, and St. Celsus's sarcophagus, 4th century, show Joseph as a, quote, beardless young man, while a mosaic icon in St. Mary Major Basilica, 5th century, depicts him with dark brown hair and beard. Fast forward 400 years, and we find the fourth oldest icon in St. Catherine's Coptic Monastery, 7th century. It depicts Joseph with gray hair and beard. How to reconcile these different traditions? Easy. Egypt can cause one's hair to go gray. End quote. So I say all that just to ask you this, since you live there in Rome, um, have you seen St. Hippolytus's catacomb and St. Celsus's sarcophagus? All it says here is it shows him as a young, beardless young man. Um, but how does it look?
So I have not been to the catacomb of Hippolytus, but the Chalcis sarcophagus. So the problem is how to know the figure is Joseph. So the problem is with some of these sarcophagi, or even these images, it's difficult to understand whether the figure is the figure of Joseph. Just because he's in the proximity of Mary of the Nativity, there are figures of a man dressed up as a shepherd. That's not Joseph. There's another figure that arguably could be Joseph, but is most likely, given his position, a representation of a prophet or a wise man. So those very, very early images, we don't really see a lot of evidence for Joseph to be present. I mean, I think that we need to move. It's evident who the figure in Mary Major is. There's no question about it. There are alternate explanations of who these icons may be because there's no iconography for Joseph to make it clear that it's Joseph in the catacombs. Um, After that, the transformation of Joseph into the white-haired man is connected to again a popular art. So again, we have another image which comes from the 5th century, and it's in a ivory throne in Ravenna, and it's again a very young, active, dynamic Joseph. So we're looking at a Joseph who's sort of represented as someone who is a protector, is a protagonist. But it's an Episcopal throne. Saint Mary Major is a Saint Mary Major is a church for the elite, but the church is also fighting in the fifth century these sort of constant noxious heresies about Jesus, not being God. They were very concerned about putting forth something that might confuse the faithful. There was always a concern about the faithful getting a little bit lost in their own heads. And so the visual way that they will make Joseph a non-threatening figure to be present at the side of Mary is by making him into an elderly man who's usually seen kind of sitting down and kind of curled in among himself, so that you don't see somebody who stands sort of powerfully as an equal, but someone who is set apart in a corner, looks older, and looks completely introverted, as it were.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a wonderful quote you have in this book, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith, and I love it. It's by Pope Benedict the 16th, where you're quoting him, who said, "quote Art and the saints are the greatest apologetic for our faith," end quote. And I love that because it's really each art piece is worth more than 1,000 words. 10,000 words, as the Chinese say. And by the way, Joseph is the patron of China as well. He's patron of everything. I think that
Yep.
this is so good. We can use artwork to preach the truth. And I love how you highlighted that so well in this other book of yours, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith. And I would only like to say one thing, which I'm pretty sure if I can put these words on the holy lips of Saint Joseph, he might say, "Can you write a book about my wife?" So I would look forward to, something that would be parallel and akin to the Silent Night, that would be, about Our Lady in art history. That would be really a great new book for you to put on your horizon, hopefully.
That would be a very, very big book because there have been lots and lots and lots of images of Our Lady.
Absolutely. Well, the rumor has it, I saw that you are going to be one of the distinguished guest speakers at the first annual International Josephology Symposium, addressing Theology of Hope, March 20th. So, as one of the six speakers, could you give us just like a sneak peek or like a trailer of what your talk might be about?
Well, I'm going to be talking about what I know, which is Joseph in the history of art. And so I'll be talking a lot more about how Joseph's transformations in art have really reflected different moments in the history of the church. I think he's a very, very important figure for helping us to understand the history of our very own church and our very own devotions through the different ways that Joseph has come to the rescue, depending on which crisis the church has faced. And in doing so, it tees Joseph up perfectly to continue to be the patron of the universal church. As we face future crises, difficulties, Joseph will always be there and ready to take on whatever form we need.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited, and I will link this down below for people to come to that symposium so they can hear you live and ask questions after your talk. And if I could, so I can put this in the link below, what's the best way that people can get in touch with you if, for example, they want to come to Rome and take a tour of the Vatican? How can they reach you best?
It is lizlevtours.com.
All right, fantastic. Well, I will put that in the section below. And just before we go, I've got this one last image. My friend Mike Aquilina showed me this. This comes from a church in Pittsburgh. And this was done by the famous Polish American artist who also did Christ in Majesty at the National Basilica in Washington, D.C. You could probably tell us way more about him than I could. I'm trying to even remember his name. It starts with a J, I think. But this image, I call it Saint Joseph, Father of the Fathers, because there he's holding a ship representing the church, and on his right and
Mhm.
left, you have the early church fathers of the East and the West. And I see,
That's a beautiful.
yeah, it's awesome. It's probably one of my favorite artworks of Saint Joseph because we see him like a bridge between the East and the West. And like his son, he would like unity in the one church. So I really look forward to somehow, I don't know how, but I think St. Joseph, our spiritual father, will help, the two lungs of the church breathe together as one in this new era of St. Joseph.
What a lovely, lovely idea.
Yeah.
And a beautiful mosaic.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Liz, for your time today. And I wish you a very
Thank you.
happy Ash Wednesday there in the eternal city of
You
Rome.
too.
And yeah, our prayers are with you and also with our Holy Father, Pope Francis. I hope he gets to feeling better. Um, so, yeah, thank you so much for being here today. And as I like to remind everyone as we sign off, don't forget to go to Joseph. Peace.
Have a lovely day.
You too. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.